During Star Wars The Clone Wars, the group known as The Bad Batch made quite the impression, and for that got their own spin-off show. Star Wars The Bad Batch began airing in 2021 and has now concluded with its third and final season here in 2024. But yeah, today we're going to be ranking all three of these seasons from worst to best. I'd love to hear what your ranking is down below, as I'm sure there'll be many mixed opinions on this series, but nonetheless, let's get into my ranking of all three seasons of Star Wars The Bad Batch. If you've seen any of my Star Wars animated rankings, you know, the ones I've done for the Clone Wars and recently Rebels, you'll know I am not a big fan of Star Wars filler episodes in these shows. So I genuinely feel like I'm repeating myself multiple times in every single one of these videos that I make, but it all boils down to the same issues, more or less. When The Bad Batch is focused on its core story, it is either okay or very good at points, and that is painfully the case here in season 2. There are great moments, but it feels as though every few lackluster filler episodes you then get a good episode, so you really have to work for those good episodes, when in reality it should just all be enjoyment. And look, I know part of the reason this is animated is because you can tell more stories with the cheaper method rather than having to do live action, and the other big reason is it's to appeal to the younger audience as well. That was the whole point of Clone Wars, as it was obvious in the first few seasons, and that does apply to The Bad Batch. So there are moments where the show can be really dark, not super dark, but dark enough, which might be a little bit too much for a really young audience, but then there's moments where it's really played for that age group, so it's a big mix. You know, sometimes you're really appreciating what they're putting on screen, but then other times, as an adult myself, I'm just like, this really is not for me. I can't complain that much, I guess, as this probably is aimed more towards kids, but there are some frustrations from that for me. Not to mention that this can just make the season a bit tonally inconsistent, as it feels like it's unsure what age group it's really trying to aim at. As I'll talk about later on in this video, other two seasons I haven't covered here give some good development to these characters, but I feel as though other than Crosshair, season 2 kind of puts their development on hold. So you're just kind of going through each episode and storyline without any real development for these characters. You do have some nice moments for them, in particular Tech, but where their charisma is somewhat shown through to earn them the spin-off show, you just don't really feel it that much this season. When this season isn't providing unnecessary and meaningless filler episodes, it does have some really strong moments and some ties which kind of make up for some faults in the Star Wars universe up to this point. But yeah, I feel like this one was easy last place for me. Season 1 of Bad Batch kicks off in fantastic fashion. You know, we're treated to this hour-and-a-half long pilot episode, which just provides a new perspective on Order 66, and it was really such a thrilling episode. And to be honest, now that I've seen the whole show, I think this is still my favourite episode of the series. I mentioned this a lot in my Star Wars Rebels ranking and how that provided some of the best Star Wars content, and the same goes here with this episode being really high up on that list. I was honestly blown away when I first watched that episode when it was released, but unfortunately I felt as though the show peaked there and everything kind of dropped down a bit in quality. It wasn't bad or anything, but when you start off with like the highest of highs, it's a little bit disappointing when those aren't reached once again. The season was still solid, but once it hit that middle part, that's when the filler episodes started to emerge, and once again, they were a complete snooze fest. Where the Bad Batch show differed from what we were introduced to in the Clone Wars is the introduction of Omega, who easily becomes quite unbearable for the majority of this series, and as this is the first season, it begins here. I was all on board for kind of like a Omega redemption arc, as I knew Ahsoka was kind of hated when she first appeared in the Clone Wars, but later became a fan favourite. Omega never really became too likeable for me. She did have her moments here and then, but overall I felt she was quite annoying. It was obvious why she was brought in and it made sense, but I felt like the way they went about it wasn't a complete success. As your typical Star Wars animation series, it has some really great moments, but also has some inconsistencies, mainly coming from those filler episodes. But nonetheless, it was still a solid enough first season with a very strong pilot, and yeah, it comes in at second place for me. off the back of season 2, my excitement for season 3 was pretty low. You know, I was gonna watch it when it came out, but I wasn't exactly counting down the days for it, and to my honest surprise, it was probably the best season of Star Wars The Bad Batch, hence why it's number 1 on this list. Season 3 fixes those pacing issues of season 2, and to be honest, abandons most filler episodes. If they are there, they do actually serve a purpose or are quite entertaining. As I mentioned previously, Omega was quite unlikable, but in this season, she is a lot better. I still wouldn't say I love her or anything, but she was a lot better and kind of, I wouldn't say charismatic, but her character had more important things to do, and they kind of made sense. They weren't, you know, irritatingly shoving her in the front. Along with that, she developed a nice relationship with Crosshair, which provided probably the best arc in this entire show, with Crosshair rejoining the Bad Batch. And where I mentioned about those fillers actually being interesting or serving purpose, a lot of this development came from those filler episodes where it just had these two spending time together and escaping, you know, kind of slowly building up the trust. It was quite effective. Season 3 is a lot more serious than the previous seasons. You know, obviously you have more serious filler episodes, but the actual story itself can be quite dark, and yeah, especially that final quarter of the season, it was very, very serious. It wasn't the same kind of content you were getting in season 2 where it was aimed at a young audience. So I did enjoy this more serious approach, and overall the compactness of this season really benefited the show. I wouldn't say I prefer this show to Star Wars Rebels at all, but I feel like given how poor the second season was, season 3 exceeded expectations massively. I do like that these Star Wars shows know when to end. You know, they don't keep going until they get really bad. I know it wouldn't have made sense if some of these shows just kept going on, given that the whole timeline of this universe can be a bit confusing. I appreciate where this show ended. You know, it was short and sweet, and I thought season 3 provided an emotional and satisfying end to the show. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please let me know what your ranking of these 3 seasons is down below. If you are interested in that Star Wars Rebels ranking that I mentioned, I'll keep a link up here, or you can just look back through my channel. It's one of my most recent videos that I've released. I do hope in the future to really make a big Star Wars TV show ranking where I cover the animated shows, the live action shows, and even some of the smaller ones which aren't as well known. But there is a lot more Star Wars content on TV than that people realize, so that won't be in the near future, but somewhere down the line. So yeah, anyway, thank you so much for watching this video. Really appreciate if you liked and subscribed. I know this is a few days after the show ended and a few days after May the 4th, but I hope you all had a fun Star Wars holiday, and I hope to see you in my next video.